All right, hopefully you've seen this because people have talked about it. This is the cover of the Navigating Fox. It was created by Yukio Shimizu, who is a great big deal illustrator. She's done several New Yorker covers and lots of other things. The in-house design at Tor.com was by Christina Fultzer, who, you get a lot of questions about how much influence you have. Writers are sometimes asked, did you do the cover? And no, I did not. And did they do what you wanted to do for the cover? And no, they did not. I've been very lucky in my career that whatever whack idea I might have had, they did a much better job. And this is my favorite cover that I've ever received. It's actually one of my favorite covers that I've ever seen. Um, anyway, I think it's brilliant. And that's the cover of the Navigating Clock. Was there something else?
That's it. The floor belongs to the two of you.
All right.
Christopher, did you want to start with some reading?
I am going to start with some readings. Thank you, Nathan. Nathan, what's your birthday?
It's New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve. Okay. Your birthday is New Year's Eve, 1970, right?
70.
My birthday is Christmas Day, 1969. So I'm a little over a year older than you.
You are.
So I expect some kind of deference to my aged state compared to you, okay? Yeah, as you always do in person. I'm going to read two sections. The first is the beginning of this book. The 20 chapters of this book are numbered in Latin ordinals and also a little description, a brief description. I'm just going to now start by reading from the beginning. Primus, between the journeys. I do not enter cities, I steal into them. So it was on a rainy autumn day when everyone in this story was still alive. The streets of Aquaclonia were pooled with water running off roofs and sidewalks, punctuated with manure and scat. Everywhere was mud. The city was brown and gray. I moved among horses, dainty-footed Telesoxodon mares and their giant clopping cousins, the Empire had sent west from across Oceanus. Some were knowledgeable and made their way unbridled. Others were voiceless, and so supposedly ignorant of any cosmos wider than their senses. These latter pulled carts and wagons, or were saddled and bearing humans or philosophizing apes. A worshipful aurochs, the ring in his nose and affectation, bellowed plain songs, demanding attention to his vision of the goddess of cattle. No one paid him any attention. No one paid me any attention either. Until I wanted them to. All of us knowledgeable creatures, horse or ape, oryx or fox, were physically indistinguishable from our voiceless counterparts. The clockwork atop the funicular station was lit against the overcast sky and told any who glanced at it the time was mid-afternoon. I would miss much of the talk I intended to hear at the Sodalities Hall high up the hill because I had been doing some preparation. I had read Octavia Delphina's newly published monograph at the subscription library staffed by theorizing tortoises in the forest west of the city. I knew what Octavia Delphina would say. I had my suspicions of how her auditors would receive her. The danger on that day was to my reputation, which was already in tatters. Blame was laid in Delphina's work. Blame she rested squarely on me. So why did I board the funicular and attend the detailing of my disastrous expedition, then less than a year gone? A more complicated question to answer than it might seem. The line leading to the station split at a gilded stanchion. Humans and those knowledgeable creatures, small enough to fit in cars built for humans and capable of carrying and manipulating money, broke left. I broke right. Larger knowledgeable creatures, horses and mules mostly, slogged up the hill on their own, alongside the voiceless, who weren't afforded the convenience of public transportation. The Asian on the right side was an astute baboon who held a stylus over one of the account books of the tally house, the treasury of Aqua Colonia. The books were used to track transactions among knowledgeable creatures who could not carry purses owing to their physiologies. Such tracking being a practice common throughout the empire, immediately in front of me in line was a calculating parrot. An interesting, knowledgeable creature, indeed, as voiceless parrots couldn't be technically said to be voiceless. They could speak, if only in imitation of others. There were few voiceless parrots this far north, other than those kept as pets by wealthy imperial grandees. The baboon asked, "Name?" "Galerius Adamantinus," said the parrot. He did not squawk, but spoke in a mellow tenor, another difference between knowledgeable parrots and their voiceless kin. The baboon made a note, then asked, "Number?" The parrot rattled off the 9 digits he had been assigned by the tally house. At the end of the week, the funicular operators would turn over their records, and a debit for the ticket would be entered against the account of Galerius Adamantinus. The parrot fluttered over the turnstile, and the baboon lazily turned it so his count would be correct. He turned and saw me. His eyes widened, but he said nothing. He made a note. "Quintus Shual," I said. The baboon nodded. He had obviously already recorded my name. "Account number 7, I said. Again, a simple nod. I trotted through the stile and heard him turn it behind me. This was the way of all my transactions in the city. I am the only navigating fox. Okay, that's the beginning. I'm going to skip ahead and read something a little less plot-driven. For those of you who already have the book and following along in your pew Bibles at home, we are on page 60. Imagine a fox. Imagine the fox is you. Imagine you are walking carefully down a smooth, featureless pathway, the color of the edges of thunderclouds. There is nothing to see to the left or right beyond a whirling mist, lit by a diffuse illumination with no source you can discern. You know you're the only person on the road. You know you can step off it at any point into a wider, more real world, one full of color and life. Imagine realizing you have been walking this road for longer than you can remember. Imagine it startles you when you realize you have a name, Quintus, and that you have a place, the wilderness of a continent lately invaded by people, humans who had created you for some purpose that is a mystery to you. You step off the road onto a grassy hillside rising above a forest. 2 human women with straight black hair braided behind their necks are waiting for you. They are dressed all in white. "I remember my name," you say to them. "What you remember is not your name," says one of the women. You believe her to be the older of the 2. "What are your names?" you ask. "I was the Lady of Tucson," says the older woman. "You will never know me." "I am the Lady of Tucson," says the younger woman. "You will come to know me." "This is the real world," you say. The younger woman laughs, delighted. For us," she says. "For now. Not for you." Where did I come from, you ask? Poor fox, says the older one. You always ask the wrong questions. The younger, still smiling, holds her hand out for you to sniff. She smells safe. It's not where you come from which matters, she says, but where you are going. Where am I going, you ask? For now, you're going to a place called Aqua Colonia. You will be welcome there, after a fashion, eventually. You will leave there again and again. The older one harumphs. Will you be there? You ask. We will be here, says the younger woman. The older puts her hand across the younger woman's. She smells wise, but not safe. Maybe later, she says. We may be here later. I don't understand, you say. That is your way, she says. She sounds wise, but not safe. My way is not to understand, you ask. The implications of your own question frighten you. Your way is the way of the fox, the older woman answers. Foxes don't understand. They never did before, she says. Imagine you are me. Imagine this is all you remember of your origins, all you remember before stepping off the silver roads into a shallow ford and looking to the south where you see a city of limestone and timber. Imagine knowing that this is not your home. Imagine you are a fox who has no home. Can't hear you, Nathan.
That was excellent.
Thank you.
So, Christopher Rowe, the first time I became aware of Christopher Rowe's writing was several years ago at a convention up in Massachusetts called ReaderCon. And I went to a table run by a small publisher called Small Beer Press. There was a chapbook there called Bittersweet Creek and Other Stories. And these were a small collection of fantastical stories set in Kentucky, as I recall. And what fascinated me about them, they're great stories to start with, but what appealed to me about them was that they were very openly set in rural South, something that you do not see much of in genre fiction. And that stuck with me, and the name stuck with me because this is a writer who's writing about things that I know and that I care about. And then a few years later, I got to know Christopher personally through this workshop that I occasionally attend, and he quite frequently attends, called the Sycamore Hill Writers Workshop, which is held here in Little Switchland, North Carolina. Well, close to here anyway. And I've had the opportunity to read several of the stories in draft, or in manuscript form at least, and to see his development and his strengths kind of to see him lean into his strengths and develop as a writer over those times. And those themes have stayed relatively consistent. You know, I think a writer who cares about the South, who cares about rural life, subjects that I notice repeating often are communities, friendships, farming, and the way people come together after the passage of some massive, sometimes cataclysmic event. And this is, you know, the way people in basically the way kind of civilization heals itself or responds to these things. And so most of these themes, if not all of them, are present in one form or another in The Navigating Fox, which I think is some of your best writing so far, Christopher. And I was wondering, because you get a little bit of a sense of this through your reading, but there's so much strangeness in this novella, which the passages you read from might hint at, but don't really quite There's a lot more than you've just heard, is essentially what I mean. And so if you were going to talk to somebody about this novella, somebody who doesn't know you or your writing, how would you describe this very unusual story?
This book's called The Navigating Fox. It's about a navigating fox.
Okay, next question.
Okay, no, the impetus, the origins of this story are actually in, well, there are many origins to this story. There are many origins to all stories. I wrote a short story called The Knowledgeable Creatures that was acquired by the great editor Ellen Datlow, who also acquired and edited this book several years ago for the Tor.com website. It's still up there if you can looking it up. The title is Knowledgeable Creatures, which wound up giving a overall title to any stories I will write in this world. And I did not know when I started that story that it was going to be about talking animals. Now, talking animals are, I think, with perhaps the exception of an external and larger creative force outside humanity, I think talking animals are probably the oldest fictional conceit in human storytelling. Sometimes they're interwoven. Sometimes, to borrow an expression from Lewis Hyde, trickster makes this world. And so I'm trying to access humanity through non-human, I mean, as close as I can get to non-human characterizations and events. How does this, you're the first person that's pointed out or asked me anything about how it relates directly to my other work. A lot of people have talked about how it's a departure from my other work, which I do not agree with this, actually. I mean, I write some cover your ears, children, pretty batshit stuff. But this is meant to be a intensely, if not an intensely human story, an intensely humane story. The older I get, the more interested I am in being kind to other people and to loving other people I don't know. And I'm also concerned about questions of identity and mystery and how we can and cannot know ourselves. Communities can help so much with learning about who we are. Families can help so much about learning about who we are. Not just our biological families, our found families, as the expression goes, which I mean, a concept I adore, found families. And I don't know. I guess this relates to my earlier work in a lot of ways that I have not thought about carefully until I started thinking about them carefully as I've begun talking over the last 90 seconds. So over to you.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that people find this to be a departure, because it seems to me very much in conversation with everything that you've done. Even the idea of kind of a post-apocalyptic setting, even though this is not in a post-apocalyptic setting, as some of your other work has been. And even that phrase, though, might be misleading. If people haven't read, for example, your Commonwealth stories, that's the things people hear or conjure up in their mind when they hear that phrase is not necessarily how you're addressing these settings. But not to get distracted. So this is not post-apocalyptic, in any kind of conventional sense. But I mean, you can't help but see the parallels here between you've got this overseas empire, and we have the early efforts at colonization. The Aqua Colonia city that is referred to is one of the sort of like toeholds that this empire has on this new country, and and that kind of interaction informs a lot of the story here. And it made me think about the way that the current world that we live in is sometimes considered a post-apocalyptic world to indigenous cultures. And so I couldn't help but think that if even though this is not necessarily an apocalypse happening, maybe it's one that's about to happen or could happen if things go, a particular way. And so I guess I don't have a specific question about that, but I wonder if that catalyzes any thought in how you conceptualize this world and how you think about how these cultures of which we see a few and these different systems of belief of which we see a couple interact with this burgeoning invasive force.
All right, all you Wikipedia editors and brainy quote contributors, get ready to write this down. All substantive narratives are post-apocalyptic because apocalypse is continuous for someone, somewhere. We are witnessing it right now in Palestine and in Israel. We are witnessing it right now in Kiev and the surrounding territories. We are witnessing it right now on the Texas-Mexican border. We are witnessing it right now in your heart. I don't know a way of thinking about surviving the world that is not retrenchment and growth from previous pain. I am not a person who believes that scar tissue is a necessary function for great art or for love or for life. But I am a person who acknowledges that from the moment Gilgamesh experienced that first flood to the moment you logged onto this afternoon, calamity has been continuous. And one of the ways that we can, the only way that I know that I can, I was going to say navigate that, but I think I mean float along the top of it, to ride with it, to shoot the rapids of calamity, is to listen to take in, and to such extent as within my powers, to tell stories. So there's that.
So I've because we've been going to Sycamore Hill together for a while, I've had the opportunity to read some earlier stories that maybe were not set specifically in this world, but I feel like I can recognize the genetic material, of some other stories, like pre-colonial fantasies, for lack of a better word. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how long this world has been living in your mind and how it has evolved.
A couple of years ago, when I wrote the story that became Knowledgeable Creatures, which was the precursor of this piece, and which was the impetus and creative drive before the other pieces that I'm writing and hope to write in this world, I decided I wanted to write a noir detective story. Now, I am not nearly as well read in noir detective stories as I should be. I'm not as well viewed, I guess, in the great noir cinema that many of my friends have been and are. But that's what I decided to do. I thought, I've got no expertise in this. Might as well write a story about it. And so I wrote a story, and I wrote a page. And on that page, a hard-boiled detective was sitting in his office, which happened to be in a seedy bar. And a femme fatale walks in, and she explains her problem and how she wants to hire him. And he's thinking inside his head, do I want this job? This lady seems kind of cagey, et cetera, et cetera. And he starts to think about taking the job, and then he realizes the first point, first person story. And I'm getting towards the bottom of the page, and he decides to introduce himself to his theoretical audience, his interlocutors, by saying, I am the private detective Connolly Marsh. I am an investigative dog. No idea where that came from. I mean, I was just writing along. This is my way. This is my methodology. All right, God love you, nano reamers, or whatever you call yourselves, answer and planner, or whatever it is you say it, use it, celebrate it, thrive on it. Not going to use those expressions myself, but I'm a person who writes from the id, I guess. I mean, I do have ideas, I do have thoughts of characters, I do have notions, but when I sit down with one of my fancy pencils and one of my fancy notebooks, I just kind of get going and make it up as I go along. Now, how accurate is that? Well, it's accurate in as much as I am working from 50 years now. I know, don't look at it. 50 years of reading and living and traveling and loving and losing and hurting and all of these things that have made up my life, and they've all kind of like inculcated themselves into this person that I am. And so when I sit down, I'm not making it up all as I go along. I am making it up as I have always gone along. Look back there. Those books back there. There are some themes up there. The top shelf is a whole bunch of Arden Shakespeare's of the third series that they're doing. And I've never written anything that had much to do with Shakespeare, but one day I might decide to. And my impulse is going to be, and has often been in the past, to like, okay, I will now research a bunch of Shakespeare. My great good friend and former wife, Gwenda Bond, pointed something out to me. This is something that she tells her students, is that like, write from your obsessions. Do not seek an obsession. Look over your bookshelf and notice, I've got 22 books on 20th century American circuses. Well, maybe you should write a book set in a 20th century American circus, which she has done. Girl on a Wire, seek it out. And I don't know. I don't think I'm equipped to answer this question with any eloquence or with any particular insight. I write how I write, and sometimes it works out okay.
Well, speaking of obsessions, one of the things I find interesting about you is the things that you talk about a lot, at least on social media, which is what I know about. And you have some that pique my interest quite a bit. Among them are I know you recently did a deep dive into the fiction of science fiction writer Cordwainer Smith. I know that you have been reading a lot of sword and sorcery fantasy, just kind of absorbing that. I know you're an avid bicyclist and fan of like competitive bike riding. Again, I don't have a specific question about that, except maybe to ask, are there ways that, well, for example, I know that bike riding has made its way into your fiction, and one of your science fiction stories called The Border State, and in Talking the Map. And so I guess, how should I ask this? Are there specific stories that you have in mind that Cordwainer Smith and Sword and Sorcery are leading toward, or is this just, it's an itch that you're scratching, and you know that eventually it will manifest itself somewhere.
Yes. The next story that I have will come out the December 26th or something like that on the Beneath Useless Skies website is a sword and sorcery story. And I just sold another one to John Joseph Adams at Lightspeed. The most recent story that I had that came out called The Four Last Things, very much informed by my reading and what I fancy, at least, as developing expertise in the work of Cordwainer Smith. Cordwainer Smith, his real name was Paul Leinenberger. He was a spook. Yeah, he was a cold warrior. He wrote, I think, in 1950, a book called Psychological Warfare, which remains to this day the standard text on the practice. He was Chiang Kai-shek's godson. Interesting cat. I'm sure had we met, we would have fled one another's company as soon as possible. His politics, such as I can discern, are not my own, were not my own. His artistic concerns, my God, so much so. I learned more about futures that can't be, but which inform us and should inform us from reading his 30-odd short stories and his one novel, which can be read as 3 different novels, but I won't get into the details of that, though I could. I have thousands of pages of documents and notes. Cordwainer Smith is someone you should seek out. Every year at ReaderCon with which Nathan mentioned earlier, most years they give this something called the Cordwainer Smith Rediscovery Award, which is a way to point out fictions and the careers of unjustly forgotten or neglected writers. The reason it's named after Cordwainer Smith is, well, first off, because his heirs were kind of the ones that started it, but also because Cordwainer Smith is intensely interesting and intensely influential over a certain type of writer. Michael Swanwick, writing a big post about my most recent short story, somebody pointed out that the first paragraph, which he had quoted, really reminded them of Cordwainer Smith. Swanwick, who is brilliant, maybe he'll win the Cordwainer Smith Award sometimes because he's criminally underrecognized. But he wrote somebody said, reminds me of Cordwainer Smith. And he wrote, Cordwainer Smith, the most imitated writer in science fiction, never successfully. And then another guy who had written about this story, Rich Horton, the anthologist and critic, said, Christopher actually said this story is kind of inspired by Cordwainer Smith. So I fancy myself a writer with range, but it's also a range. I was talking to my nephew William a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about music and singing, and I said, I have a 12.5 octave range. And he looked at me and I said, on the piano, because my octave range in singing is like 0.6 or something like that. But Cordwainer Smith has been a huge influence. Cycling, I'm pointing at a very beautiful and expensive bicycle that you can't see hanging on the wall, has been a huge influence for decades now. It's the most efficient machine ever designed. Just saying. Post-apocalyptic. Why in post-apocalyptic stories is not everybody riding bicycles? They're simple machines. They're easy to maintain. They don't require you to go kill people and take their vanishingly small amount of gasoline. So bicycles, Cordwainer Smith. I think I'm a serial enthusiast, which may just be something that I should be medicated for. I don't know, but they all figure in. You know, I latch on to things. I just recently started really diving into the work of a woman named Josephine Saxton, who is this year's winner of the Cordwainer Smith Rediscovery Award, and fascinating character, fascinating person, fascinating writer, and she's hard to track down. You know, it's all used books and digging up old pulps magazines, but you know, you got to look into this stuff, man. You gotta find. Don't depend on the influences you know you have.
Hmm.
Seek out other influences. Stumble across other influences, and I'm not talking about. I'm talking about go into some random ass small town museum that is made up of whatever crap everybody in that county had in their barns and attics and decided to devote to that museum, and walk in there and discover that Harrison County, Kentucky was a center of making wreaths of human hair. Okay? And do something with that because nobody else has. And learn about it and think about it and make it yours. All right.
I have one last question before we turn it over to anyone in the audience, because I think this is like also a fundamental part of who you are as a writer, or at least that's how it seems to me. You spend a lot of time workshopping stories with Sycamore Hill, working with other people, other writers' stories, and I know you've also taught at the Clarion Writers Workshop, which is kind of one of the maybe the premier workshop for young writers in the genre.
New writers. Let's say, yeah.
Yes, thank you. So what is it that you find rewarding about this kind of work? Why do you return to it as often and as enthusiastically as you do?
This afternoon, a woman named Chelsea, who was one of my students at Clarion in San Diego last summer, and she's got a new story up on Unknown magazine. Google it. Fantastic publication. You can read stories and poems up there. And she's got a new story up there, and it was the story that I workshopped with her that week. And she thanked me or acknowledged that in that week I read that story and we were workshopping it. And I actually don't remember what the workshop's response to it was. Sorry, everybody else at Clarion 2022. I don't care what your response to it was, but my response to it was to look her in the eye and say, "You know, this is good, right?" And I'm not sure she did. You know, I'm not sure she did, but you know, eventually she was convinced it was, or somebody wrote her a check for it, which is, you know, the dirty old secret is that, like, you know, getting checked for a story is quite validating. And I teach. How do I teach? I teach. I'm as rewarded by teaching college courses in introductory composition as much as I enjoy teaching master classes in kind of specific and some kind of deep dive into very specific aspects of speculative fiction. But I always tell my students two things. One, I'm going to speak to you with great authority. I'm going to speak to you from an experience from an experienced position. I'm going to speak to you from a successful position. I'm going to speak to you as a well-regarded writer. And I'm going to say something to you during this class, during this week, during this semester. I'm going to say it with great authority. I'm going to say it with all those credentials just mentioned. and it is going to be absolutely wrong for you. I won't know what it is. Unfortunately, you will only think you know what it is because it's almost certainly not the thing that you hope that it is. But I'm going to say something, and it's going to turn out to be this completely screw up on my part. I will have misapprehended you. I will have misunderstood you because you're a person and I am a person, and the connections we have are not whole. Okay, that's one thing I say. And the other thing I say, this is more specific to, teaching English 100 at a community college or whatever, and that is this. Okay, surprise. I do not give a good goddamn what grade you make in this class. I hope you pass. If it looks like you're not going to pass, I hope you withdraw because I won't screw up your student aid as much, your student loans as much if you withdraw as if you fail. But here's my only hope for you, which is that this day, you walked into this room and you had a certain degree of competence as a writer, and you had a certain degree of confidence and ability as a critical thinker. In a week, in 16 weeks, when you walk out that door, I want you to be better at those two things. All I want is for you to be a better writer and a better critical thinker than you are right this minute. If that happens, I have done my job and you have done your job, and we should equally celebrate that. But if you make a D and you're better at it, I don't care. All right. I got to grade the way I grade, because it's American education or whatever. But if you accomplish those two things, if you're a better writer and a better thinker, you won and I won. All right. That's what I got.
All right. Stephanie, are there other questions?
So the audience has been quiet so far. They're hitting the little like button, which is cool. They just haven't asked any questions yet. So remind our audience, if you have any questions for Christopher or Nathan, please chime in with those in the chat or via email. I have a question. At least I hope it's a question to get started. We'll see if it's a question. So, Christopher, you mentioned earlier, pardon my paraphrasing, getting at humanity through non-human characters, something to that effect, right? Which I really appreciate, and also what you said about it being such an old form of storytelling. And so I wonder, for instance, at that moment when you came up with the investigating dog, right, and it came out of nowhere, from that moment on, do you then have an approach to writing non-human speaking characters that's fundamentally any different than writing human characters?
Yes. Dogs investigate. All right. Walk a dog around a neighborhood. They go by a light fixture in the park. They dive in there. They're getting the news. All right. They know what's been happening in the neighborhood lately. I do not have access to that. I do not understand what is going on in the canine community of downtown Lexington, Kentucky, because my dog sniffed a lamppost. Okay. And that's kind of a pat answer, but you can't see this bookcase, but down in this bookcase, there's a very complete collection of layman's books on fox behavior. One of them is called The Most Feline Canid, because foxes, this will come as a surprise to no one. Foxes are the canids that exhibit the most cat-like behaviors. Okay. I've never met a cat that I would describe as exhibiting a lot of canine behaviors. I've had two cats that like to fetch. I've had one cat, Gwenda, if you're out there, you know who I'm talking about, who will shake hands. But the yeah, it's a tremendous opportunity. It is a reductive opportunity, but simultaneously tremendous in that we think that we know something about the personalities of animals based on our observations, our goggled comprehension of their behaviors. Foxes are sly, are they? Or did Aesop say that? And so ever since then, we've all thought foxes are sly. Foxes are sly, you know? And maybe they are. Maybe some of us are sly because we like foxes. But yeah, sure. I mean, it's cliches, it's truisms, it's assumptions, but it's something. It is the part of the storytelling apparatus. Part of the matter of telling is to take these rhetorical figures that are associated with a set of characteristics and then kind of move them around. No writer likes to be told that all they're actually doing is moving around known rhetorical figures. I don't like to be told that. I have read too many 20th century French literary theorists to not believe that that is in fact what I'm doing. But screw those guys too. So yeah, I think that dealing with talking animals is. I mean, everybody loves talking animals. Bugs Bunny, who doesn't love Bugs Bunny? Right. Except Elmer Fudd, but even he does secretly.
I mean, he is kind of in love with Bugs Bunny. Let's be clear. Yeah. Well, that's a great answer. So I feel better about having asked an actual question because I wasn't sure to begin with. So thank you, Christopher. Nathan, anything to weigh in on there in terms of, that you're able to pick up on in terms of your approach to writing and characterization?
Well, only that when Christopher was answering, and the first thing he did was gesture to his nose and asking about talking about writing it from a dog's point of view, is that is essentially, I think, the inroad to writing any character. I think honestly is just trying the best you can to understand, to see the world from their perspective. Mm-hmm. It's like just kind of put us, to the extent it's possible, put aside the lens with which you look at the world and try to imagine what it is for this other being to apprehend the world. How does it seem to them, and how do they feel about it? How do they perceive it and react to it? And how are they threatened by it or encouraged by it? I think that's just that's, I think, fundamentally the way into a character.
Yeah. So Christopher, I really appreciate what you said about bicycles in the apocalypse and in any apocalypse. Mm. My misanthrope brain then kicked in and suggested to me that then people would just be killing each other over spare tires. And chains that weren't rusted.
Tires are easy. You can make tires out of cork. All right. I'm not saying they'd be great bicycles. I'm not saying you'd whittle along at 30 miles an hour. But like really shitty bicycles can, if you load them properly, can carry 15,000 pounds of material. Yeah. I read a story called Nowhere Fast, which is a post-apocalyptic kind of steampunk story, set in Kentucky, post-apocalyptic era, where everybody's riding bicycles all the time. And there, somebody has hoarded chains. They have hoarded bicycle chains. But, you can make an effective-ish drive out of rubber bands for a bicycle. Don't get me started on bicycles. I know so much about bicycles.
I think that's great. And I feel like, in addition to the story, which I'm remiss in not having read, but it's high at the top of the list now. It feels like that's another book from you, though, is just waxing about bicycles and perhaps bicycles in the apocalypse in a longer form. Because that is something that one of the, certainly a way in which folks who are not now dependent upon cars, and often that means lacking a certain amount of privilege, right, in terms of not having cars, of course, then have it all over anybody who does have that privilege when the apocalypse comes, right, in terms of being able to cope with that reality, which is something that I think is one of the reasons that I'm drawn to some apocalyptic fiction too. Is like the people who are best prepared are the people who are the least rewarded most often today, right? So bicycle, right?
I know a lot of
bicycle riders and rural
I know
people.
a lot of bicycle mechanics, and none of them have much political or social power.
Right. But in the apocalypse,
if the shit came down, they would be princes.
Exactly.
Or actually, more likely, they would be enslaved by princes. Right?
We'll see. Yeah, there's the miss. Yeah. I mean, we are talking about humans after all, so that's probably right. Yeah. Right. Or not, if we can throw some optimism. So we've got a question from Russ, who says, do you know Russ? Or do you just love the name Russ?
I've known Russ since I was 14 years old.
All right. Hey.
If it's Russ Walker living in Pennsylvania.
It is. Hi, Russ Walker. Christopher, how has storytelling, quote unquote, tradition or quote unquote parlance, if you want to go there, of your South Central Kentucky homeland influence how you write consciously, not inherently?
Consciously, not what?
Inherently. Russ's question.
Russ, I happen to know your training as a historian and not as a literary critic, so I question your authority in asking that question in that particular way. A brief aside: many years ago, not that many years ago, I was at the first location of Quail Ridge Books in Raleigh, North Carolina, and some church out front had a jumble sale going on. And actually, Russ, I'm about to disabuse you of a notion, which is that I found for a quarter a pristine copy, dust jacket in great condition of William Faulkner's The Town, first edition, and I bought it for a quarter. And Russ could collect Faulkner first editions. And I sent it to him. Presumably, he thought that I'd paid big bank for it. Russ, I didn't. Paid quarter. And
you're revealing that right now.
I'm revealing it right now. Russ is logging off right now. All right.
Before he even gets the answer to the question.
Exactly. All right. So Faulkner. Let's go back to Faulkner. There's this inescapable, seemingly, impulse among particularly white, particularly men of the South, where they have to get this thing out of their system that I call Matnatapapa. I'm sorry, I'm probably screwing that up. Collected in the chat book that Nathan referenced earlier, Bittersweet Creek and other stories, which would be highly collectible if there were any copies of it anywhere in the world besides my storage facility. And you got to get that out of you. You got to get that out of you. Where I am from, South Central Kentucky, Russ will appreciate this. Adair County is the westernmost Appalachian county. It is the westernmost Appalachian county because a woman whom I love, named Hilda Legg, was working for Mitch McConnell when the Appalachian Regional Commission was created, and they drew this big map of what counties are going to be considered Appalachian and get sweet, sweet government money that amounts to nothing in terms of the lives of Appalachian people. And so when they did that county, since Hilda lived in Adair County, there's this weird ass kind of gerrymandered thing over where we are actually from, as Russ knows from his readings of the sociologist Dr. Linwood Montel, is the Upper Cumberland Plateau, and which is demographically and sociologically and culturally indistinguishable from Appalachia, actually. So I'm not sure how much difference that makes. But where I'm from, I describe myself sometimes as being top down, a citizen of the planet Earth, a citizen of the United States of America, a Kentuckian, and I'm intentionally breaking away from the word citizen now because I'm speaking to something more identity related. A Kentuckian, a person from the Upper Cumberland Plateau, from the Penny Rhyme, and I will not discuss that, and an Adair Countyan. Adair County is where I'm from. It's where Russ and half of his ancestors are from. It is first in the state in Kentucky, alphabetically, and in no other categories in which I'm familiar. Yeah, I mean, it's who I am. It's absolutely who I am. I cannot escape it. I do not want to escape it. I want to embrace it. I want to return to it as I have been over the last few months as I've had experienced some life changes. And wherever you are from, it's universal. All right, where you are from is your individual access point to the wide world, to the wide world, to the wide. Okay, so don't abandon that. Don't back off from that. Celebrate it and use it. Okay, that's what I've done. That's what I try to do. And my art, such as it is based in that.
Excellent. Thank you, Christopher. And thank you for the question, Russ. So we are just tipped over the top of the hour. Perfect timing. And so I'd like to just wrap up by inviting both of you to offer any final words. Also remind folks, if you haven't already picked up a copy of The Navigating Fox, we encourage you to do that from us or another local indie. If you don't have means, check with your librarians. They're awesome, and we love libraries. And they will hand you books for free that you can take home and read, and we love that. And so we'll start with Nathan and then give Christopher the last word before we end our evening.
As is right. Yeah, all I would say is that The Navigating Fox is, like I say, I think Christopher's best work. I think you can't go wrong with any of his books, but I would absolutely suggest people seek this out and read it. It is funny, it's sad, it's strange. It's a terrific piece of work.
Thank you, Nathan. Thanks for being with us this evening. Christopher.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for doing this, brother. Buy Nathan's books.
That too, yes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. What's it called? Bookshops.org. Is that the website?
Bookshop.org. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you do not have a local indie, if you're a person who does not, pick one. Pick one anywhere in the United States of America. Malaprop is a great one. Book Moon in Northampton, Massachusetts, which is run by the people behind Small Beer Press, the extraordinary Gavin Grant and the extraordinary Kelly Link, is a good one. Buy your books from if you have to buy your books online, and that's a perfectly great way to buy books. Go to bookshops.org, not Big River, and I don't know, man. Books are important, and my final words are these about libraries. There is this extraordinary thing where you can go to your library and ask for a book, and they might not have it. They might not have this book. In fact, according to WorldCat, only 248 libraries do. But you can ask them. A lot of libraries have websites. They even have these little things where you can click on and say, request a book. Librarians love to hear from their patrons. A word, by the way, I insist on over customers. Whoever came up with customers for libraries, fi upon you. So ask them to buy it. They might, that'd be great. Then not only you would get to read it, but other people in your community would. And finally, this is a weird way to end something in which I'm supposed to be trying to sell a book, but the greatest social institution that exists in terms of arts and letters and in terms of opportunity for growth and learning and heart is something called interlibrary loan. All right. Not enough people know about this. This is the best thing in the world. If you cannot find a book, new or used, there is almost certainly some library in this wide world that has it. And if you go to your library and say, I want this book, and they say, we can't get it, we don't have it, say, can I interlibrary loan it? And they will say, yes. And for some bizarre and strange reason, that is a miracle. God placed his hand on someone's shoulder and invented interlibrary loan. Okay, what that means is you say, I want to interlibrary loan a book, and that librarian gets on the phone. They don't get on the phone, they get on the computer and say, hey, who's got this book? And some of the librarian somewhere says, I got that book. And your librarian says, will you send it to me for free? And they'll say, well, we'll charge you shipping. And your librarian will say, well, sure, of course. I mean, I will not pass that shipping charge on to my patron, but send me the book and you'll get the book and you'll get to read it and then you'll get to send it back. It's the best thing. It's one of my favorite things in the world, along with chocolate pudding.
Now that's a perfect ending right there. Perfect conclusion to the event. And yes, yay libraries and indies, whatever's in your means for your books. Thank you both so much for a delightful conversation this evening. And thank you to everyone who's been with us this evening. We do appreciate you spending time with us and getting into books with us and talking to authors with us. And we hope to see you again sometime, or, even if we don't see you like this, be with you again sometime, share space with you. Meanwhile, please stay safe and well, and take care and happy reading. Good night, everybody.
Visit Asheville.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Yes. Good night, y'all.
Good night.